Hi, my name is Christopher Sweet. I am IT Support 3 at Parks Library here at Iowa State University. I am the Jamf admin for the library and their SCCM admin as well.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Nealand. I'm the lead tech for Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication, also at Iowa State University. I handle everything from staff and faculty machines to lab machines and a bunch of checkout equipment and wrangle students, student employees. And we're here today to talk to you about those people who are accidental MacAdmins. Name of our presentation, Accidental MacAdmins, Windows to Mac, making connections between GPOs and config profiles and policies. Our agenda for today, first we'll talk a little bit about why we chose this topic. Then we'll talk about how to deal with your system configuration, software and printer installation and configuration, the user experience, and a little bit about rescue operations if there's time. So why did we choose this specific topic? Chris and I were kind of discussing kind of towards the end of JNUC last year that, hey, it would be really fun to do a joint presentation. And one of the topics that kind of came up is we hadn't really seen anything that handled how to transition into becoming a Mac admin from a Windows background. I've seen a lot of stuff on Reddit occasionally or fairly regularly where a Windows admin will pop up and say, hey, I have inherited a bunch of Macs, or they want to buy a bunch of Apple devices. How do I manage these? The top comment usually says, get Jamf Pro. But there's not a lot that goes on behind, beyond that, just kind of not really getting into how to transition. What do things look like? What do things, how do things correlate in Jamf to what they're used to with Windows GPOs? So our goal today is to try to provide a framework for making those connections between Windows group policy objects and how to accomplish the same tasks in Jamf using config profiles and policies.
All right, so let's hit on system configuration. There's going to be 4 bullets here: security and privacy, network, update control, and remote access. And under security and privacy, we have encryption, user access control on the GPO side, Gatekeeper, store access, and then control panel and system preferences access. So let's talk about encryption. In the GPO world, you've got your BitLocker key escrow, hopefully, and MBAM. On Jamf Pro, we've got our file vault config and the policy used to deploy it. So here we are with a GPO for BitLocker, key escrow, and MBAM, and various fun settings for drive encryption, where it's going to escrow it. As a note, BitLocker and MBAM is going away. It's going to become part of Intune, and so to be part of Microsoft Endpoint Manager in Intune, and it's referred to as the BitLocker client.
In Jamf, there are, obviously on the Apple side, it's File Vault 2. In Jamf, you would log in to the JSS with your admin account and go to All Settings and choose the under Computer Management Disk Encryption Configurations. Here you'd set up your individual configuration for each site. For example, this is the Greenlee School of Journalism encryption policy. We would go ahead, give it a name, set the recovery key type, and then upload our institutional recovery key. We'd also want to enable this for the current or next user. Second part of this is you actually have to create a policy to deploy that. We like to put ours in self-service so we have a little bit of control of when during which process what part of the process this actually gets enabled. So you go ahead and use the disk encryption payload, and you would choose your action to be apply disk encryption configuration and set the configuration that is appropriate for the site. And then you would choose when to require File Vault 2, and we usually choose it at next logout. We make this policy available in self-service, And we want to kind of make sure people see the description of what's going to happen. When we first set this up, it was about 5 years ago. We had a mandate from the state of Iowa that every mobile device, every laptop needed to be encrypted. And we needed to not only have it encrypted, we needed to be able to prove that it was encrypted at any point, and also get into the machine if we needed to, if people lost a password or if they needed to unlock it and they didn't remember their password and they needed to have that individual key to decrypt it. At that time, we still had a lot of spinning drives. So you can imagine this took a little bit of time. So our description used to say, hey, if you're doing this, make sure you're hooked up to power, and it's going to take a while. So some machines were taking up to 12 hours to encrypt. So thank goodness for solid state drives. Otherwise, we probably all would have gone crazy long before now, right, Chris? So what this looks like is they go into self-service and they get an icon that says faculty and staff encryption. And then they click the file vault or install or enable button. And then it shows them that description. It says, go ahead. It says, when you log out, this will be applied. They log out, they have to enter their password for the machine, and then it does its thing.
All right, so here we are with user account control and Gatekeeper. And your user account control, when it prompts, if you want to elevate without prompting, and all those fun things.
On the Mac side in Jamf, we're going to use a config profile. And under the security and privacy payload, we'll click the general tab. And under the gatekeeper setting, we're going to select Mac App Store and identified developers. You can choose whether you want your users to be limited only to Mac App Store apps, or if you want them to be able to install common things like from identified developers, or if you want them to be able to install items from anywhere. You also can set it so that users can't override this setting. There are other things that you can set in this area too, but those are the gatekeeper related items. Now, both Apple and Microsoft actually have app stores where users can purchase and install items without necessarily having an administrator password. Depending on your area, you may or may not want to use this. For labs, we certainly don't want to have this enabled. And on the Mac side, we like to have our users have kind of a choice. We have apps that we want them to have by default, and we want them to also be able to use the App Store for that. But in the labs, you definitely don't want to.
So here in the Microsoft Store access and a GPO, you can have it only show the private Microsoft Store and automatically download and install updates, or you can just turn it off completely. Jennifer will touch on the Jamf side.
On the Jamf side, again, this is a config profile. We'll go to the restrictions payload, and there's an option under the applications tab where you can allow App Store app adoption. You can allow software update notifications, require admin password to update or install apps. You want to check that box if you want to allow users to adopt those default App Store apps. You should uncheck it if you want them to use the VPP apps instead. So basically, the volume purchasing program from Apple allows you to bulk purchase licenses for different applications. So if you want to be able to control what version of an application available through the App Store that you want your users to have, or if you want to make sure that they don't have to have an Apple ID in order to install or adopt these apps, this would be something that you'd want to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about that at a later time in the presentation. But this is where, if you want them to allow that App Store adoption, then that's where you check the button.
Okay, here we are talking about control panel and system preferences access. On the Windows side in GPO, if you want to hide control panels or completely restrict if they can get in or not, this is where we do it.
On the Mac side, again, we're going to be in a config profile, and we want to go into the restrictions payload. And under preferences, you can check an option to restrict items in system preferences if you don't want them to be able to control specific or open specific control panels. We tend to use this for some of our kiosk machines where we really don't want them to be able to do anything more than control the volume, and maybe increase deal with some of the accessibility issues. But you can enable everything or disable everything, or you can go through and do a more granular selection of what you want them to allow. Here, if you don't want them to open the App Store at all, you can set that preference. It's on the list.
So system configuration, dealing with network, firewall config and VPN. So here we're talking about the firewall, Windows Defender firewall on the GPO side. On the Jamf side, under security and privacy, payload is firewall. So here is your Windows Defender firewall, your global settings, domain, private, public, inbound, outbound. And on the next one, on the Jamf side, we're dealing with pretty much the same sort of thing. You enable it, and then you can set which apps can and cannot get in and out, should you want to do that.
You can also enable stealth mode if you don't want to respond or acknowledge to those attempts by applications to contact your machine. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about VPN configuration. On the GPO side, it'll be computer and user configuration under network options, and in Jamf, it's in the VPN payload.
So here we are with a fun VPN settings. Set your connection name and host, and there we are.
On the Mac side, in Jamf, again, it's a configuration profile, and you enable the VPN payload. You can set a connection name, the VPN type, and then you choose your connection type. We use Cisco AnyConnect in our area. And then you can have the server address as well, so that will come up by default. Here's another fun one. If you work on the Windows side of things, you are very well aware that sometimes Microsoft updates the OS when and where it wants, regardless of what settings you've set. So that's always fun. To kind of mitigate this, you want to be able to set it to control access to updates. You don't want things to be able to update like on a deep frozen machine in the middle of the afternoon in the labs and totally ruin your entire next 3 days. And you want to also be able to restrict OS updates. Even if you're not dealing with a lab situation, you don't want your users ending up with an update that hasn't been tested yet.
So talking about update control, on the GPO side, we're dealing with Windows Update as well as Windows Update for Business. On the Jamf side, using config profiles and software update. So here we see GPO setting our software update server, and as well as when it would update. Okay.
And in Jamf, we'd set a config profile to, pardon me, using the software update payload. You could set a specific update server if you want it to go to that, if you have an update server set. You can have it automatically install macOS updates. You'll notice the top one is unchecked. It says allow installation of macOS beta releases. We'd really prefer to not have that happen on our machines unless you have people that are that you know and trust and will use that power wisely and not early adopt and be upset when things don't work on campus. You can also have it automatically set to install app updates from the App Store if an app update does become available. You can have it set, if you choose to or not, automatically check for updates, automatically download new updates when available. So these are things that you have a little bit of control over to make sure that your users are having a better experience. You really don't want things to update in the middle of class. Trust me, been there, done that. It's kind of a living nightmare.
So with now the fun of software as a service, we get to OS build restrictions on the Windows side. We'll control that through the Windows Update for Business, and on the Jamf side, we'll do that through software restrictions. Here is our Windows Update for Business, playing with the feature updates and then build updates, which channel, and then how long you want to defer. The Jamf side is going to do a lot of the same thing.
So one of the big things that we run into whenever Apple does a big OS release is sometimes not all of our institutional utilities and home-built apps work with the latest and greatest update of macOS. So for example, we have a product called TN3270 that we use on campus, and we're still trying to, it's not even compatible with Mojave. And we've been working on, our people on campus have been working to transition this to a new product that still isn't ready, and Catalina's already out. So we're hoping very shortly. So we have a lot of people on campus that are still using 10.13 just because they need this product. They can't, it just doesn't work in Catalina. So they're stuck on High Sierra and Mojave for a bit. But if you need to restrict any software, this is specifically speaking to OS versions, you can go ahead and go into your Jamf site, go to restricted software, and create a new software restriction. So in this case, we're specifically blocking macOS Big Sur beta. So you need to have the exact process name. And sometimes this changes. It's usually been, throughout the last few years, it's been pretty consistent, but they just recently have a change. So this slide might already be outdated. But for example, your process name in this case is install macOS beta.app. You want to restrict the exact process name, and then you can actually check the box to delete it if you find it. If Jamf recognizes that it's been downloaded and you want to get rid of it. And you definitely want to kill the process when it's found. We like to have a nice little message that says, you know, such and such department doesn't support macOS Big Sur beta at this time. Usually, if it's a released version, for example, Catalina, there was a time period where we were waiting for some other pieces to be finished and for more applications to be more compatible with Catalina. So we had a message that said, you know, we're not supporting Catalina at this time. We'll let you know when we do start allowing it to be installed. And it's pretty straightforward. Okay, now we're going to talk about printers and software configuration. So I think I'll handle more of the printer side, and then Chris is going to talk to you about some software installations and some of the pieces that need to be done on the Mac side to get that to work. So talking about printer configuration, there's two parts to this. You have your configuration and then how people access those printers. So on the GPO side, you have your printer configuration. Generally, you have a server or a queue that's hosted on a print server, and you want to share that and push that out through a GPO so that users in specific OUs get specific printers. On the Jamf side, it's through a config profile to set the common printers, and then through policies and to get more fine-grained printer availability to your users. So on the Windows side, I'm going to go ahead and did you want to talk about this slide?
You're doing great on printer. Go nuts.
So you'd set up your printer the way you want it set up on your print server, and then you would deploy printer. And that's under your, I want to make sure that I get this right, because I've kind of jumped into, and Chris was going to take this one. It's under computer configuration, policies, Windows setting, and printer connections. So that kind of tells you what protocol it's using, and that's how you do that. But you have to set up the printer first before you can deploy it. And that's true on the Mac side as well. So again, we're going to go into our full JSS. You have to have admin privileges in the full JSS in order to set up a printer. Go to all settings and choose printers. And this is one that Chris sent up. You give it the name of the printer or the name of the printer that you want it to have. Throw it in your category, and then any information that you need to or notes that you need to have. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like before you really set anything up. Here we have a printer. The queue name is library-00330-BW-1. This makes sense to us on campus because this is how our naming convention on campus. We have the model of the printer. We also have the location of the physical printer itself. And under the device address, we have our printers are all mostly hosted on PaperCut. So we have the address of the PaperCut server and the queue name. And then you'll notice that we've unchecked that box marked used generic PPD file. If you have a printer that can handle different paper sizes or has different margins than normal, you want to, wherever you can, pick the specific printer description file that matches your printer. So you'd select to upload the printer driver, and it just brings up a dialog, and it assumes that you have the software installed on your machine that you're uploading or creating this printer from. So you'll use that to find the PPD in your library printers folder.
As a note, typically those are going to be .gz, so you'll need to extract that PPD out of the .gz. Don't try and upload it. It's not going to work.
Okay, so once you have your printer description, your printer actually created, then you need to deploy it. There's a couple ways to deploy it. If you have printers that everybody gets and everybody should get, and you want to make sure that they're installed by default, you can use a configuration profile to push those out. For example, there's two printers that I want every lab machine to have and every faculty and staff machine to have. So I have a configuration profile set up just for that. And I should mention, and I meant to mention this back at the beginning, when you do config profiles, don't put everything all in one configuration profile. You'll never remember what it does if you do it that way. You want to make sure that you have some granularity to how you set these up. So this would be for configuration profile for printing. So I'd say default printers profile, things of that nature. So once you have your configuration profile, you want to select the printing payload. And then if you click the add button, you'll get a list of all of the printers that are available actually in your entire JSS. So you really want to make sure that you're selecting the correct ones. So here, these are H8 Hamilton 16, HP LaserJet Enterprise M608. Those are our black and white printers. And then we have our color printers. So every student can print to those two printers. And then you get an option to select the default printer. And that would be, in this case, default obviously is black and white. But we also want to allow the user to modify the printer list for faculty and staff machines. So we want them to be able to install their printer from home. We don't want to totally lock it down, but you absolutely could if you wanted to. You can allow printers that connect directly to the user's computer as well. And you can actually, the reason for doing this is you want to make sure that these always get on the machine in a configuration profile. Once it's scoped to a machine, it will get that profile. So we want to make sure that that happens. Second way to deploy printers, and this would be for printers that not everybody has to have. So we have printers on different floors. In our labs, there's a printer. We want to make sure that only those machines that are supposed to be using that printer get those. So we're going to use a policy to set that up. So you set create a new policy in your site, select the display name if it's enabled, the category, and then when you want that item to be installed. Usually it's at enrollment complete, or if you want it to be just available in self-service, you'd have all of the triggers left blank. So that's how you would set this up initially. This is where you can get, you want to install packages in order to get the printer drivers on the user's machines. You want to make sure they have the software that's necessary to install the printers and use the printers. So we're going to go ahead and add those packages. And this is where we realized that we had messed up. We never showed we don't have a slide about adding packages. So We will definitely add that in the Q&A once we go live to make sure that you know how to get a package up into the JSS. So these are our printer description and our printer software drivers. And here we have 3 printers that we want to be installed in this policy. So we have library black and white, 1 and 2, and then library color, for example. And these, again, are printers that you have to pre-set up in the admin area of your JSS.
All right, my turn. So now we're going to talk about software configuration, software installation, the privacy policies, preferences, policy control, scripts, and then applications and custom settings. So GPO side will talk about assigned applications, and Jamf will talk about how to deploy software. As a note, at the library, at the very least, we tend to not use assigned applications much, if at all. So there are many ways to do it. Just because I'm showing something on the Windows side doesn't mean that it's the only way.
Yeah, we generally use SCCM on campus for a lot of these things. So this is just making sure we get the basics down, for example, as Chris will show you.
So here's our SCCM client. We're talking about the deployment type, the source, and we deploy it out to all of the machines. So here on the Jamf side, software deployment, we're talking about Mac App Store apps, using policies to deploy packages and scripts, and then using approved kernel extensions in config profiles.
Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about Mac App Store apps and how to get those and how to deploy those applications. So this is an example of my listing of Mac App Store apps for Greenlee. You'll notice that we have a list of apps that are available, the version number, third column has what type of app it is, and then the second, it's available through the App Store. You can actually have in-house apps and books as well that are deployed via this method. And then it says it's got a license. The first column of numbers, where it says like 150, 122, those are the number of licenses that we've purchased. Even free apps, you actually purchase the app, and I'll show you a little bit about that. So it shows the total number of licenses available. The next column shows the number of licenses that have already been deployed. And then the third column shows the number of licenses remaining. The last column shows how many groups it's scoped to, how many computers it's scoped to. So it's kind of a general thing. So in order to purchase VPP apps, you need to have Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager. In Apple School Manager, once you log in, you can, if you scroll down to the content area and click apps and books, then you can go ahead and search for the app that you wish to deploy. Like I said, most apps are free. Some apps actually are purchased. So you need to make sure that your VPP account has the credit card information up to date or purchasing card information up to date before you deal with those apps that cost. In the search window, you'd start typing the name of your app. Comes up with a list of everything that has that name in it, or just like it. Then you would select the app that you want to purchase. You'd choose to buy licenses. You want to assign it to the specific location, so it should match the site that you're applying it to, or that you intend to deploy from. And then you want to select the number of the quantity of licenses that you'd like to purchase. Once you've entered your quantity, you click Get, and then after a bit, you'll get an email message to your VPP account that says, "Hey, your licenses are ready for deployment." Yes.
Make sure that when you're purchasing, that you purchase for the Mac, not iOS.
Yes, they have the names.
And go on, where is it? Where is it?
Right.
Purchase more, and I was buying the iOS ones, not the Mac OS ones. So
yeah, that's how I ended up with some random licenses for Mac OS when what I really wanted was the iOS version. So thanks for pointing that out. I totally had forgotten about that. So that's awesome. Once your licenses are available, you have that email, and this can take a little bit, especially I've had periods of time where it's taken like an hour or so. Usually it's a lot faster than that, just a few minutes. But you want to make sure that these apps are assigned and those licenses are available before you create your app. Once you're in the Mac App Store area or category or area in your JSS site, then you go ahead and you want to add a new app. So you'll get a screen that looks just like the screenshot here. You start searching for it again. And here it shows the whole list of Kindle stuff, and you can preview or view it on the iTunes preview page if you are kind of unsure of what it does, and then click Add. Some of the information is pre-populated. There are a couple of options that you can uncheck or check so that it works the way you want it to. You want to give it a display name so that your users can find it if you choose to make it available in self-service. Assign it to a category. The version automatically comes up. The bundle identifier automatically comes up as well. And if the app is free, that app is free box will be checked. You can also schedule Jamf Pro to automatically check iTunes for app updates and apply those iTunes. Or you can actually force apps to update. If you know your users have gotten a bad version of an app, or if you have like a whole iPad cart that you want to update at the same time, you can check automatically force app update, or there's a handy button if you don't want it to automatically do that. If you want to have some control about when things get updated, there's a button here that says force update. Okay, and then it adds an app URL. You don't really have to deal with that. Under distribution method, your option is, the default option is make available in self-service. Otherwise, it's called, and I'll have to scroll down to see again, I think it's install immediately or allow user to, or notify user that it's installed. I'd have to take a look at that to see specifically what it is. It is the install automatically / prompt users to install button. So I like self-service. The next tab then of course would, you'd set your scope, and then you would go to the VPP tab, or I'd have to, I think this is another slide that we forgot, folks. So we'll make sure we get a link to that in the end. In the third tab up at the top of when you're creating your Mac App Store apps, there's an option to, I think it's manage distribution, and then it should show, you check that box and it should show how many licenses you have available to distribute. And this works pretty slick. It really will stop. If you only have 25 copies of it or 24 copies of something, and you have a 25 machine iPad cart or laptop cart, that last machine, you're going to have to request another license. So it's generally a good idea to request a couple more for the free apps than you think you'll need. That way, if you add some devices after you've purchased the app, then you'll be covered.
All right, so we've touched on the Mac App Store apps. So now let's talk about using policies to deploy packages and scripts, and then the approved kernel extensions and config profiles. So under deploying software and using policies, you would go to the packages, click the Add Plus button, and then it'll list all the packages on the site, and you would find the one you want and click Add, and there it is. Under Action, you have typically two things, install or cache. So looking back at the printer example, if you wanted to have the printer drivers on there, cached, ready to install, you could cache that package on the machine, and then once it's installed, it'd kick off a trigger, which would install the package before the printers. So, and here now we're talking about the lovely kernel extensions. As a note, you want to do this, otherwise your users who don't have admin rights are going to have a bad time, because they will install something and will ask, hey, do you want to allow this? Go to security and privacy and allow it, and they'll go to do that and they won't be able to. So as a note, you'll need the team ID and the kernel extension bundle ID, and I will show you how to get that on the next slide. There it is. you run that lovely command, and the SQL command gives you that first column. There is the team ID, and then your kernel extension bundle ID is after that. You'll want those, as you see. Yep, there you are. So you're muted.
So far, without having one of us forgetting to unmute ourselves. So you'll see in that where it says display name, and then it says the kernel extension bundle ID. If you have all of that, if you upload that information, once you have the team ID, then it will bring things up, I think. So, and we're getting close on time. So we're going to go ahead and talk quickly about the user experience. Most of us all are very familiar with the fact that if users don't see something in their dock or their start menu, they don't think it's installed. And then you get lots of things. Oh, you didn't install Office. You didn't install this. Well, yes, it is installed. It's just if you don't set up your dock configuration or your start menu, they may not see it. We'll also talk a little bit about startup and login scripts, a little bit about the login window and roaming profiles and config mobility. So let's start with the start layout on the dock. On the Windows side, it's a GPO called Start Layout. On Jamf, it's a config profile, applications, and custom settings payload. So on the GPO side, you want to go into the Start menu and taskbar, and then Start Layout, double-click it, and you can set your path to your Start Layout after you've exported it with a PowerShell command. On the Mac side, it's a config profile, and we have to go into application and custom settings. And you set up a dock the way you want it to be set up. You copy that to the desktop, and then you upload set the preference domain that you want this for. So it's com.apple.doc, and then you'll upload your plist. The plist has to be in XML format. So if you forget about this, like I do every single time I do this, then once you choose your file, it's going to give you an error, and it will give you the command to convert that to an XML1 file. So once you have that all set up, then you get a lot of gobbledygook below the plist file, but that basically all it says is this icon is in this position, and then that's your dock.
All right, so startup and login scripts. GPO side, we'll talk about both the computer config and the user config. Computer config dealing with the script startup, user config dealing with the login and scripts login. And on the Jamf side, talking about policies using script payloads.
So I'm going to talk about this because apparently I'm one of the people, I don't know about anybody else, but when I was working with Windows a lot, which I switched jobs back in January, and I haven't had to use Windows on a regular basis very often lately. But it never failed that either a license didn't come in on time before classes started, or we found some problem once the users started using the machines. So I was always having to have those login scripts to fix things on every user or after every restart so that things would work the way they were supposed to. For example, and then I would also have a login script that would mount a network drive that had the license file for specific applications. IES virtual environments, for example, uses that type of licensing. I hate that type of licensing, but it happens. On the Mac side, we've had this is an example of a script we use all the time. Basically, what it is, it's a policy that forces rebind at startup. So it forces the machine to be unbound, and then it binds it again. So I have a script that's set up. The policy has a script and an action, binding action with it. So navigate, add your script, make sure it runs before, because this is the script that unbinds. And then you add your directory binding, and then that fixes. So we had a lot of times where machines will drop off the network, or not really off the network, they'll lose their AD binding. And that's a pretty big deal when you have a classroom full of machines that need to be logged in by a user at the beginning of every class. So this way we can say, hey, if you see the red dot up in that menu bar, that means it's not bound. Just restart the machine and wait for a moment, and then it will rebind itself and you can log in as normal.
As a note, we will talk about how to upload scripts in the Q&A again.
We will. It goes along with how to upload packages.
Yes.
Surprise that we totally forgot how we actually make all of this stuff happen. So for this specific script, I need it to run at startup, and I need to run it at startup even if it can't contact the JSS. So my trigger is startup. My execution frequency is ongoing. And then I have the box set to make available offline, which means that if it can't contact the JSS for some reason, it's still gonna go ahead and run to make sure that we're still bound to the Active Directory.
All right, talking about the login window, both on the GPO side and then on the Jamf side using config profiles. Here we go on the GPO side. Doing things like removing Control-Delete, as well as not displaying who the last person signed in was.
And on the Mac side, we're going to go ahead and we want to have a message that shows up for all of our users. For example, the banner that we display is "This computer is a property of Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication. If found, please email." And then because our users log in with their NetID and password, we want the name and password fields. We don't want them to have to scroll through a ton of users in order to get to their user. So, and then we also want them to be able to restart or shut down the machine if necessary. So that's in the login window payless under the login window payload under the window tab. Under the options tab, again, there's a lot of stuff in this login window payload that's super useful. So if you have an opportunity, go in and dig around. We want to disable automatic login. We don't want to display the Apple ID setup when they log in for the first time. And we don't want them to have the option to turn on Siri. And then we want to make sure this is where the set computer name to computer record name is as well. So we want to make sure that we have that along with enable external accounts. Under the access tab, and that's under the options tab. Under the access tab, we want to be able to have local only users also log into our AD bound machines. And this is where you can set it to allow only a specific group of users to log into the machine. So that's pretty useful as well. Then the last pane is that script. Login hooks and logout hooks they always say they're going to be deprecated. I don't know when exactly they're going away, but you want to also execute the client computer's login and logout hooks if they have those.
All right, so talking about roaming profiles and config mobility, mobility under configuration profiles, sorry. Here's roaming profiles, doing the fun things such as deleting cached copies or ones that are over such a date, as well as the home directory and the network path if you're going to set such a thing. So here on the Jamf side, we're going to create a mobile account when logging in. You want to make sure that the require confirmation is unchecked. Otherwise, if your user is not an admin, they're going to have a bad time again. Again, the network home, local, and then where that home folder is created at.
Okay, and that brings us to the end. It's a rather abrupt transition from talking about stuff to kind of at the end. And, we realize this isn't a complete instruction guide on how to transition from Windows to Mac management. This isn't even, there are many different ways to accomplish the same tasks, but obviously we're already over time. So there's a lot more we could have covered and a lot more that we kind of forgot that we should have covered. But we really hope that you've got at least something out of this presentation.
And as a note, if you're a Mac admin and you're ever tossed into the Windows world, you realize you could probably reverse this. Should you
can reverse this. I'm lucky enough that I actually don't have to deal with Windows very often anymore. So, okay, thank you all for listening. We really wish we had been able to be in San Diego to present this for you in person. So this feels kind of a little impersonal and not quite as we're both pretty friendly people, and we would prefer to have been in person. But thank you. And definitely give us feedback using this survey, the widget that they talk about.
Thank you.
Thanks.